This season, McLaren is astonishing everyone in the world of Formula One. At Monza, the robustness of the MCL39 was apparent once more, and even though it did not secure a victory, it demonstrated itself to be an exceptionally strong vehicle. We recall the McLaren from several years ago at Monza, which had significant drag and was unable to overcome its deficiencies. Today we are talking about a team that can aim for the Constructors and Drivers' Championship well ahead of the end of the season, and the real strength is not just the aerodynamic management of the car, but more the tire management. In today's video, we will delve into what the secret of McLaren is and why we see them as so competitive compared to all the other teams. We obviously need to hear Montezemolo's statements about Ferrari because they have sparked a lot of discussions. Let's take a look at the Red Bull situation, the Max Verstappen issue, and the new floor that will be coming to Tsunoda. And finally, we need to talk about brakes for 2026 because it's a very important topic. Before we begin, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos on Formula One and Ferrari topics. With that being stated, let's dive into the topic immediately. Tyres are frequently considered the sole determining factor. However, in actuality, the rim and hub are essential components in how the tire interacts with the asphalt surface. McLaren is said to have invested heavily in iFarm simulations and structural studies on the wheel assembly to improve thermal management and load distribution. The tire sidewall controls the tread, reinforced with Kevlar cords. And here an essential concept comes into play, which is referred to as cornering stiffness or lateral rigidity. The greater this particular characteristic is, the smaller the slip angle needed to achieve optimal grip. And this is also adjusted with the pressures, but McLaren seems to have found something more. In fact, the Pirelli tires are not a variable element for the teams, but the wheel rim is. If the connection between the tire and the rim, which is commonly referred to as the bead area, is exceptionally rigid, then any deformation occurring in the rim itself is effectively transmitted to the sidewall and the tread. And here could potentially lie McLaren's competitive advantage. In fact, they utilize specialized alloys that are capable of ensuring significantly greater elastic flexibility. This means that the rim, while staying within the limits of elasticity and always returning to its original shape, is able to slightly modify the shape and the way the tire transfers energy to the ground. We are talking about minimal percentage variations, but in Formula One, those are the ones that can change everything. Essentially, if the wheel better controls the movements of the sidewall, the slip angle needed is reduced in corners, and most importantly, less heat is generated. This is an essential aspect, as during a race, the tires are not utilized to their absolute maximum limit, but rather managed strategically over the entire distance. Producing less heat results in maintaining a more consistent race pace and enables drivers to push more aggressively without the risk of overheating. In practical terms, McLaren drivers are capable of loading the tires with greater energy both in traction and while cornering without the temperature increasing excessively, and this provides a significant advantage over the course of 300 kilometers of racing. I believe this could truly be one of McLaren's secrets. It's not an illegal trick, but an area of intelligent development that is not easily visible from the outside. It's a classic technical finesse that often distinguishes those who compete for the world championship from those who are chasing. Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes have struggled to find the same consistency in tire management. And if McLaren has indeed accomplished this equilibrium due to the rims, we comprehend why Norris and Piastri are able to push for extended periods without experiencing a decline in performance. Obviously, we are still in the realm of hypotheses because no team truly reveals their secrets. However, by analyzing the data and observing the behavior on the track, the theory of extra wheel flex makes a lot of sense. It is the demonstration that in Formula One, not only do major aerodynamic updates make the difference, sometimes it's the hidden details in the wheels that decide who wins and who loses. This might potentially shed light on the reason why McLaren requires a reduced amount of air within the braking system, as they skillfully handle the slip angle more effectively, enabling greater flexion and improved traction without excessively overheating the tire. A substantial advantage both in terms of traction and during cornering because they are able to push with greater intensity and impart additional energy without causing the tire to overheat. You comprehend well that it's a significant advantage, particularly on circuits with curves that necessitate more steering angles as opposed to tracks with a singular input. In this regard, it functions in a manner exactly contrary to Ferrari, which excels on tracks requiring a single steering input and encounters more difficulties on those three-dimensional curves. McLaren arrives in Baku with the aim of clinching the Constructors' Championship. If Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris succeed in scoring at least 9 points more than Ferrari, the British team would secure the 2025 Constructors' title. It would mark the 10th in its history and, considering the season's performance, a target well within reach. Last year, right in Baku, McLaren managed to overtake Red Bull in the standings, starting a leadership that they have maintained until today. However, this time the situation is different. Once the Constructors' Championship is settled, a new chapter begins: the internal rivalry for the drivers' title. Andrea Stella, McLaren's team principal, has crafted a clear and strict management system known as the Papaya rules. Fundamentally, no internal conflicts that could potentially result in losing valuable points. No hazardous maneuvers between teammates, and a readiness to diversify strategies if it benefits the team's overall outcome. So far, Norris and Piastri have followed the rules, even sometimes sacrificing a personal result. But what will happen when McLaren no longer has the excuse of securing the Constructors' Championship? Certain individuals hold the belief that once the Constructors' Championship title is firmly secured, McLaren could potentially encounter intricate scenarios. If the MCL39 maintains its dominance as observed in the recent series of races, the management approach will be relatively straightforward. But if Red Bull or Ferrari were to get involved, then the strategic decisions from the pit wall could become decisive not only for the outcome of individual races but also for the drivers' championship battle. We saw an example in Hungary when McLaren chose different strategies for Norris and Piastri to counter Charles Leclerc. A logical choice to beat Ferrari, but it effectively created internal differences. At the end of the season, with the title at stake between the two Papaya drivers, a similar scenario could have a huge impact. At Monza, Red Bull showed signs of resurgence with a low downforce setup that allowed Verstappen to become competitive again. Lameschi confirmed progress in the overall management of the car. It is not certain that Max cannot compete for victory on some of the final tracks. Even Leclerc on favorable circuits remains a threat. In that case, McLaren could find itself at a crossroads. Should the team prioritize one of the two drivers to effectively counteract the opponent, or should they persist in guaranteeing equitable treatment even if it means potentially conceding stage victories to competitors? Personally, I believe that McLaren is experiencing a situation similar to what Mercedes faced during the times of Hamilton and Rosberg. The internal code works as long as there is a priority team objective, but when the two drivers start competing for a personal title, the tension inevitably rises. Andrea Stella has shown great balance, but the reality is that a team cannot completely control the hunger of two young drivers who have the chance of a lifetime ahead of them. If Norris and Piastri genuinely commence competing for the Drivers' Championship, the Papaya rules will inevitably need to be adjusted. Here, I envision two potential scenarios, but I would love to hear your thoughts as well. Either McLaren will successfully manage to handle the conclusion of the season in a clean manner, maintaining absolute fairness throughout, or it will be compelled to make unpopular decisions, which could inevitably leave repercussions in the future. For now, the data is clear. Just a margin of 9 points more than Ferrari is needed to close the constructors' discussion. And so, once the next race is concluded, from that point onward, the real spectacle will be the battle between Norris and Piastri, with McLaren as either the referee or the protagonist of the Drivers' Championship. We need to listen to Montezemolo's statements about Ferrari together because you can see his love for the red team, but at the same time, he was also a bit critical of the current situation. Ferrari left Monza with yet another disappointment. In front of a sold-out crowd, the team was unable to even secure a podium finish. The year 2025 continues like this, without victories and with yet another postponement of the most anticipated event. A championship that has been missing since 2008, the Constructors' one because the Drivers' one has been missing since 2007. On the sidelines of the world premiere of the documentary Luca Singred, dedicated to his life, Luca Cordero di Montezemolo, former president of Ferrari and a symbolic figure of Schumacher's golden era, commented on the situation of the team. "I have seen beautiful images of the fans," he stated, "but also a team that despite many announcements has not yet won even a single race. And even if they had won one, Ferrari after so many years must win the World Championship." I personally have gone through extremely difficult moments, losing 9 or 10 titles in the final race, but at the very least we reached the point where we could compete for them. Nowadays, however, Ferrari doesn't even make it to the last race with an opportunity to win. I hope things change, especially for those people who were at Monza who continue to have unwavering faith. Ferrari has even more responsibility towards them. The most challenging aspect, however, concerns the team's fundamental identity. What truly saddens me, as I previously mentioned, is witnessing Ferrari without a guiding leader. Without robust leadership, it lacks a steadfast spirit. And above all, too many announcements are made that create excessive expectations. First, results are achieved, then announcements are made, and in my opinion, Montezemolo didn't mince words, and the point is clear. Today's Ferrari is experiencing difficulties due to an absence of strong leadership. There isn't a central figure, whether male or female, who can truly embody the determination and visionary outlook required for a successful project. These words hold significant weight because they originate from an individual who, during the 1990s and 2000s, managed to construct a victorious system surrounding Schumacher, Todt, Brawn, and Byrne that dominated the realm of Formula One. Montezemolo possesses a deep understanding of the weight of pressure and comprehends how crucial it is to maintain a well-defined structure and a robust spirit. And I can only agree with his analysis. Today, Ferrari seems to live more on statements and proclamations than on results. Expectations are inflated, but fans see a different reality on the track, one that is light years away from what was promised. In Formula One, credibility and authority are built only with facts, and if results are lacking, every announcement turns into a boomerang. The problem is not only technical, it is cultural and managerial. A Ferrari without a true leader is a Ferrari that risks getting lost in compromises and superficial statements. As we mentioned earlier, McLaren innovates their cars, finding ingenious solutions that allow the car to go faster. When they started in 2023, they were last in the standings in Bahrain, excluded in Q1. From there, they rolled up their sleeves and managed to reach the top of Formula One. So Montezemolo is right. Today, the team must more than ever respond to those fans who, despite everything, continue to fill Monza and believe in the myth of the prancing horse. And every one of us is included in this lineup. Furthermore, Montezemolo was more supportive of Binotto rather than altering the team principle at the conclusion of 2022 to appoint Vasseur instead. In fact, I quote Montezemolo's exact words: "Continuing to change means losing stability, and stability is one of the most important elements for winning. Binotto should have been permitted to continue his role. Today, I observe a team lacking a leader and devoid of spirit." On this final point, I do not entirely concur with Montezemolo. In my opinion, it was the right time to make a change because Binotto had already proven himself. He had been with Ferrari for several years, and many fans wanted a change at the top. The problem is not so much the team principle itself, but the internal structure of Ferrari, which compared to other teams is suffering in organizational terms. On the rest of the discussion, I completely agree with Montezemolo. In my opinion, Ferrari has lost a bit of its soul and is currently living on proclamations and announcements, but without concrete results on the track, and we fans would like to see the opposite. Initially, you compose the narrative, and subsequently, you narrate it. It is not feasible to reverse this process. Furthermore, Ferrari is heavily depending on commemorations and the repetition of previous accomplishments. And this is very nice to see for us fans, but what is the red team currently doing to make history? This is one of the questions we must ask ourselves, and as of today, the answer is simple. At this moment, Ferrari is not writing history, McLaren is writing it, Red Bull has written it, Mercedes has written it, and this is a fact. Let us conduct a concise overview of the previous episodes, as there have been a few slight updates concerning the sports management and the individuals who are involved. When a technician leaves Maranello, some downplay it by claiming they didn't bring victories, while others interpret these departures as a sign of managerial instability. The truth, as frequently occurs, resides somewhere in the middle. Losing essential personnel is never simple, because in the realm of Formula One, every skill is the culmination of numerous years of experience and expertise that cannot be substituted in an instant. And for this reason, the departure of Wolf Zimmermann and Lars Schmidt, key figures for power units, has left a gap in Ferrari, because these two figures have decided to follow Mattia Binotto to Audi. Now, just a few months from the introduction of the 2026 power units, engineer Enrico Gualtieri finds himself managing a team with less experience and less historical memory. Just as the FIA opens up to ADWO, additional development and upgrade opportunities to balance the regulations, in short, stability is fundamental, but at this moment Ferrari doesn't have much of it. The aerodynamics department is no longer experiencing tranquility. Following Enrico Cardile's departure in the month of April, Ferrari reorganized the hierarchical structure, appointing Diego Tondi as the new head of aerodynamics. But the disappointing season has not favored consolidation. Additionally, from the 1st of September, Frank Sanchez, a French engineer, former Sauber, and an old acquaintance of Fred Vasseur, has arrived. A choice that raises suspicions. Will he come to supervise or even replace Tondi? As of today, there are no confirmations. We talked about it yesterday as well, but the fact that Vasseur is bringing in people he trusts suggests that the Italian technician is not experiencing a calm moment. On one hand, the idea is clear. Having trusted people around is natural, especially in a competitive, high-pressure setting like Formula One. Vasseur is doing just that by bringing in Loic Serra, Jerome D'Ambrosio, and now Frank Sanchez. The motto is always the same: everyone is useful and no one is indispensable, and this works in theory, but in Formula One we know that it's not quite like that. Continuity and stability frequently make a significant difference. In my personal opinion, Vasseur is treading a delicate line. On one hand, he is correct in wanting trusted collaborators alongside him. Without a strong and reliable core group of trusted technicians, you cannot construct a successful and winning project. On the other hand, however, Ferrari cannot afford yet another internal disruption. There are too many CEOs and too many new entries risk fragmenting the structure just when maximum cohesion is needed to face 2026. So even if there are no changes at the top, there are still many changes below the top. So let's talk about the key engineers in the most important departments for 2026, the aerodynamics department and the engine department. Montezemolo emphasizes stability, which is essential in Formula One and has been lacking at Ferrari for many years. Nevertheless, at present, even if Vasseur remains in command, there is an absence of internal stability within the foundational departments. We are hopeful that the modifications observed with Vasseur will result in a favorable outcome, but as of now, the scenario at Ferrari is one of ongoing transition. There is consistently a transformation in progress and there is rarely any stability. It appears that everything accomplished previously is incorrect when it would be essential to begin anew from a robust foundation to reconstruct the team gradually with patience and tranquility. Otherwise, it fails to establish a cohesive atmosphere. And if Adrian Newey had become a part of Ferrari, what might have been different? Following the 0-0 in Zandvoort and the letdown in Monza, it is unavoidable to ponder whether the team ought to have recruited Adrian Newey and consequently missed a significant opportunity. The SF25 is not performing as hoped, while 2026 looms with a regulatory revolution. In that context, having alongside the genius who has shaped some of the most successful cars in the history of Formula 1 would have been an enormous advantage. Adrian Newey has joined Aston Martin, a team that Lawrence Stroll has transformed by heavily investing in facilities, technicians, and resources. But the real market coup was indeed him, the man who made Williams, McLaren, and especially Red Bull victorious. Newey is a unique figure. He demands a free hand, a trusted group of engineers, operational freedom, and a significant budget. Ferrari could have offered all of this, but they chose not to make the decisive move. Officially at Maranello, they have convinced themselves they can win without him. In reality, it seemed like yet another demonstration of managerial arrogance. Fernando Alonso has already had the opportunity to closely observe his methodology. Newey does not design separate parts, but a unique system where every component, whether mechanical, aerodynamic, or structural, is part of an overall vision. It is this ability to see the car as a living organism, along with an extraordinary talent for interpreting regulations and anticipating trends, that sets him apart from everyone else. His career is full of insights that have changed the course of Formula 1, innovative aerodynamic concepts, borderline regulatory interpretations, and winning cycles built with continuity. He hasn't always been right, but he almost always got there before others. Ferrari officially decided not to depend on just one person, a political and cultural choice. In Maranello, they don't like the idea that the credit for a potential revival should be attributed to a single person, no matter how brilliant. This is also why I am quite skeptical about the idea of seeing Verstappen in red. Because Ferrari never relies solely on a single individual. Even during the Schumacher era, the credit was not exclusively Michael Schumacher's, but also belonged to Rory Byrne, Ross Brawn, and Jean Todt. It's better to stick with their own internal model, even though the last 15 years have been marked by mistakes and missed opportunities. The problem is that in 2026, it will mainly be about development capabilities and interpreting the new rules. And in this, Newey is simply the best. In my opinion, Ferrari has missed an unrepeatable opportunity. Certainly, hiring Newey would have meant granting him enormous power, perhaps more than the management was willing to give. But in Formula 1, results are what matter, and the red team hasn't won a title since 2008. Instead of taking the risk of becoming Newey's Ferrari, they preferred to remain the Ferrari that continues to hope. It is a cautious strategy that underscores the persistent challenges encountered by the prancing horse and the difficulty in transitioning from an outdated mindset. Presently, Newey is in the process of developing the MR26, and when Ferrari encounters him on the racetrack, he will undoubtedly be eager to demonstrate that he was correct. If Aston Martin were to win, the regret in Maranello would be enormous. In short, Ferrari gave up on a genius, probably out of pride and fear of sharing the credit, but in Formula 1 there is no room for pride, there's only room for winning. The last thing we need to discuss is the new Red Bull floor that will arrive in Baku for Tsunoda, because Verstappen has already used it in Monza, and it's a good choice because it serves to evaluate Tsunoda under the same conditions as Verstappen. The floor seems to ensure greater efficiency, but it does not solve all of Red Bull's problems. That's why we saw Verstappen run with less downforce at Monza than everyone expected, and Verstappen manages better even with a car that has less downforce compared to one with more. It is his innate talent. It's embedded in his very DNA. Meanwhile, Tsunoda will not completely resolve all his issues with this new floor. Certainly in Baku, I anticipate a more attainable Q3 for Tsunoda, but I believe the race pace will continue to be inconsistent, and everything will also depend on the setup window, including the ride height, anti-dive, and front suspension. The risk is that the floor might make the car a bit more nervous but more efficient on the straight. It will be crucial to evaluate the floor in Baku because it's a track with many stop-and-go sections, many slow corners, the castle section which is very slow, and more than aerodynamic load. It's important to have good mechanical grip and thus manage the balance between the front and rear well. We will see how Tsunoda performs also because he is under observation, as next year he might join Jaws in Red Bull. Therefore, in these last races, he is competing for the second seat in Red Bull. Let me know your thoughts on all the topics we discussed in the video in the comments. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. That concludes everything from Rust for